For the tiny handful of you who have been following me ever since I was just a text blogger, this video will probably feel very nostalgic. So as a lot of you are probably aware, I'm obsessed with making lists. It's my favorite pastime, it's something I can sink countless hours into, and the ultimate type of list to me is the favorites list, especially the anime favorites list, because obviously anime is what I'm the most into, and constructing the perfect favorites list is sort of like almost my end goal as an anime fan. Back in my text blogging days, I would write so much about favorites lists, about different theories of how to build them, different ways I would go about it. Every time I changed mine, I would write another post about it. I was like just so into the idea of having the perfect favorites list, and of also having analyzed every show on my favorites list. I had like a series that I was doing way back called The Epic Journey, because I was 17 and it was the late 2000s, where I was trying to like explain exactly why I loved each of my favorite shows. And that's more or less still a major theme of my channel. Now, my favorites list has become extremely complicated in the last 2 years, and I get a lot of comments about it. Well, maybe not a ton, but like every once in a while someone goes to my anime list and they ask me about my scores, because if you go to my anime list, I've scored every show that I've watched in the last 2 years, and I have this Google Doc that's linked on my page that has a list of every show in order of how much I like it, with scores next to them that are a little bit more nuanced than the scores that Mal allows, such as like a 9.25, 9.5, 9.75, and then a 10. So I've got like those more nuanced scores in there. But I get asked a lot about all the shows that don't have scores, which is about 2/3 of my completed list, because those are the shows that I watched before I got into making videos about anime. And the reason that that gap exists is that for about a year and a half, almost 2 whole years before I started anime videos, I was not really watching anime. I had this huge stint of being into other things and not really consuming anything new or rewatching my old favorites. I just didn't consume much anime at all for like the better part of 2 years. And in that time, I think my tastes changed considerably. Now, I'm the type of person whose taste is always kind of evolving, and there's always new things that I'm interested in, and some things that I lose interest in, and, you know, I've been watching that happen my whole life. I got into anime in the early 2000s, and a lot of what I was into back then is just not even relevant to me anymore. Like a lot of shonen action stories like Naruto or Rurouni Kenshin and some stuff like that. Like the reasons I was into those stories are not reasons I'd be into something now, which is to say that they have violence in them. But ever since I started making videos about anime, I feel like my general opinions have been pretty consistent. Like the stuff I look for has been very consistent for the last 2 years. I don't think my tastes have changed too considerably over this time, because I feel like now that I'm writing these really big analytical posts, most of which are broad in concept and really explore like what I like about anime, where I make a video like, this is what I think makes good visuals, and then like I kind of have that standard so well realized that it doesn't change that much. So I feel like now my scores are much easier to keep track of. They're much more consistent. Every once in a while I'll tweak something like up or down, because I give my scores like immediately after finishing a show, and sometimes I'm like riding high on the adrenaline of the show, and then later I just don't remember it that well and I lower the score. Or, you know, maybe I think about a show a lot more than I first realized, and therefore it goes higher up. Either way, my scores don't change a whole lot anymore. So essentially, all the shows that have not been scored are just waiting for me to rewatch them and to decide how I feel about them now, and then they'll be cataloged along with everything else. But what this means for my favorites list is that I don't feel comfortable putting anything on my favorites list unless I've watched it in those last 2 years, unless I've like confirmed that it's a favorite for me now, that it fits to my current taste. Which is why at the end of 2014, I made a video about my top 10 favorite anime, and I was like, you know, very emphatic in stressing that like this is just stuff I've watched this year pretty much, like stuff I either rewatched or have seen for the first time recently, which is why a lot of my favorites are shows that that haven't been there very long. You know, stuff like Psycho Pass, Ghost in the Shell, Shirobako, Hunter x Hunter, Everything else, basically. Log Horizon, Kill La Kill. All those are shows that I watched in 2014 or 2015, and so they're very new to the list. Whereas a lot of the old favorites, I don't know where they'd stand. And a lot of shows that I once considered to be top tier, like even right before I stopped like watching as much anime, I don't consider that highly anymore. For instance, something like A Tale of Memories, which in 2007 was my favorite anime ever, because I was just at the right age and just at the right place in my life that the show hit me hard. But now that I'm older and I don't really have a lot of the same like problems or the same things I'm going through, then the show, like, I see it less for its impact on me. Like, I can remember its impact and I see how it made those connections, and I still think it's a good show, but it doesn't have that visceral impact that it did back then. And it's rare for shows to even have that at all now. I would say something like Shirobako comes the closest to having that kind of impact on me, but most stuff now I like more for like the ideas and the themes and being able to, you know, pull it apart and analyze what's so good about it. Now, the existential dread that I feel in all of this is that it means I don't really have a favorites list out there. There's nowhere you can go and really see my, like, honest-to-God favorites list, because there's so many shows that I know should be on there that aren't. And so it makes me, like, uncomfortable to make a favorites list. Like, even last time I did it in 2014, it felt really weird, and I only did it because I thought it would be fun to do at the time, and because it was October of 2014 when I was putting out a video every single day for the entire month to win a bet, so it was a good way to get a video out that day. But ever since then, I've been holding off on updating that list and making a second top 10 because there's certain shows that I specifically feel I need to watch before it's worth it to make that list. Because if I made another top 10 and then I immediately watched one of those shows and it changed it, then it would feel like a waste of time. But there's so many of those shows, and so many of them are not like immediately relevant for me to get to, like I don't need to make videos about them right now, that it's gonna take forever before I catch up on all these shows and get to remake my favorites list. So instead I'm making this video. Now, back when I was studying favorites lists and everything, I came to the conclusion that the ideal length for a favorites list is exactly 10% of your total completed anime. I don't know why this figure works so well, but it works perfectly for me, and it's worked perfectly for everyone who I've seen use it. People who have 300 completed shows have a top 30, and it seems to work for them. If you have 100 completed shows, a top 10. Like, everyone seems to work really well with this. My current number of completed shows is 722, which means I get about 72 favorite anime, and that sounds ideal to me. Now that I'm using scores, and I feel pretty good about the scores that I've been using on my anime list. Like, I feel like they're very consistent, and all of them make sense to me, and like, none of them are like really a huge question mark attached to the end. Right now, I'm considering a favorite anything I've given a 9 or above. So if it's a flat 9, 9.5, 9.25, 9.75, or a 10, that's one of my favorites. I feel pretty good about cutting it off there, judging by like what comes next, which I would just not quite consider one of my favorite anime. So, following that, I currently have 25 favorite anime. Not enough. Obviously way short of the total I should have. The current favorites are K-On!, Ponyo, Shirobako, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, Hunter x Hunter 2011, Psycho Pass, Gurren Lagann, Log Horizon, Kill La Kill, Kare Kano, Garzy's Wing, The Wind Rises, The Borrower Ariete, Kara no Kyokai movies 1, 5, and 7. Those could be counted separately, I guess, but for the sake of this, I'm just counting them all together. Space Dandy, Toradora, Yu Yu Hakusho, Serial Experiments Lane, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Bakemonogatari, Ping Pong, Barakamon, Baby Steps, I Can't Understand What My Husband Is Saying, and Spirited Away. Those are the 25 shows I would currently consider to be a 9 or above favorite shows. So I've also got a list here of all the stuff that I think should be on this list or could potentially be on this list. Starting with shows I haven't even finished, but that I feel like as soon as I do, they'll be on the list. The biggest one being Gintama. I've mentioned this 1,000 times before, that Gintama, by all rights, is one of my top 10 favorite anime. I've seen 160 episodes of it. I just haven't completed a whole series. And I just, as a matter of, like, I just think it's only right to put a score on something if I finished it. Like, it's just a clear, easy rule for what should be scored on my anime list. So, you know, eventually I'll give a score to Gintama, and that score will be a 10. Some others that I haven't finished yet that I think will probably make the list. Hajime no Ippo, really fucking solid sports show that I could easily see giving a 9. It's a lot of fun to watch. It has great memorable characters, awesome soundtrack, well directed, just altogether a great show that deserves to be on the list. Food Wars, very similar. I don't know if this one will be a 9 or an 8.75 depending on how it goes. I'm about halfway through season 1. My brother has been telling me that season 2 has been great and that it just keeps getting better. I just really enjoy watching this show. It is a blast to consume. Heartcatch Precure is one that I have no idea if it'll rank on my favorites list, but I love the aesthetic of the show so much. It's from, like, my favorite character designer, Umakoshi, who also did Kashorin Sins, which I would consider to be, like, the best looking show of all time. But it's that while being pink and poppy and fun and magical girl show, with awesome action scenes in it. It just has so much that appeals to me, like, on an aesthetic level, and then it's also got great characters, and so I don't really know where the plot goes. I've only watched half the show, if that, but, like, I don't know, it could be a favorite. And lastly, Kodocha, which I've actually watched very little of, but I love the characters so fucking much, especially the main character, Sana Kurata, is one of my favorite anime characters of all time, even in the short span of time I've watched the show. It's like 100 episodes long, I think, and most of it has not been dubbed, because I was watching the dub, and even then I haven't even finished that, and then I'd have to switch to the subbed version. It's super long, so I haven't gotten around to watching it, like, but I really like what I've seen so far. So alright, those are the shows I haven't finished yet that could potentially be on my favorites list. Now I'm going to go into the shows that I have finished that have great chances. Now, I'm not going to talk about any of these at length because I talked about all of them in the 250 Anime Recommendations podcast. So if you watch that or listen to it or whatever, find these shows, then you will hear what I have to say about them. Instead, I just want to talk about how likely I think they are to make it on this list. So first, I'm going to talk about the ones that I almost am sure will be a 9 out of 10 or above. Like, there's no way these shows are not going to make my favorites list. The first one is Cowboy Bebop, one of my first anime, been watching it since 2001. It's got everything. It's one of the prettiest shows, it's got the best soundtrack, I love all the characters, it's seared into my memory. I've already made videos about it even without rewatching it, just because I know it that well. End of Evangelion, probably my favorite anime movie, has been on my list, has been like my #1 favorite anime a lot of times over the years. Only reason it's not on the list is I just haven't, I watched all of Eva and then didn't end up watching the movie afterwards for some reason, but I probably will soon. Fooly Cooly has always been a favorite of mine. It's the anime I've watched the most times in total. I'm sure I've brought it up countless times on the channel before, so that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Eureka 7, this is kind of the big one. Like, the reason I have not updated my favorites list is kind of specifically because of Eureka 7. Because Eureka 7 became my favorite anime immediately when I watched it in 2007. I watched it again the next year. I absolutely love the show. It's been a mainstay of my favorites list, but again, I don't know how I'd feel about it now. I don't know if my opinion would change dramatically, but I feel like there's very little chance that the show won't make my favorites list. I think it's, like, all around just the best, like, coming-of-age adventure story that's out there, and one that also fits my personal taste aesthetically and musically and just in terms of being awesome. So, like, the biggest reason that there hasn't been a new favorites list is that Eureka 7 should be on there, and I feel weird about making one before having rewatched the show. Hidamari Sketch will almost certainly be on the list. It's always been my favorite slice of life show. I just really love all the characters, and I love the tone of it. I love Akiyuki Shinbo's directing, that it's applied to a show like this, that his directing, which usually is used for, like, wacky, insane scenes, you know, like off-the-wall comedy or crazy, dark, bleak stuff like a Madoka or something, is applied to just a daily life show, and it really enhances it and brings it to life, and I like it a lot. And on the same note, Lucky Star, Another one of my favorite slice of life shows and slice of life comedies. My favorite show to watch in a group. My favorite show to watch drunk. I've seen it like probably 3 or 4 times, just not recently, but I absolutely adore that show, so that'll definitely be in the top. Summer Wars, one of my favorite anime movies, absolute blast to watch. It's just very fast-paced and fun and likable in its premise and themes, so I could definitely see that staying on the list. Shiki will probably still be on there because that show fucks me up, and I just love the last stretch of episodes so much and like how they are thematically that I could definitely see it being back. I feel like I'll appreciate that one even more now. Like, I already loved it, but I think it's even more up my alley today. And Hourou Musuko, which Wandering Sun, which was for a little while considered my favorite anime when I was like getting out of anime, and that was like one of the only ones that I rewatched in that time and still had strong feelings about. I don't know if will be like quite as attached to it now because like those themes were really important to me at the time. Well, like I really was interested in the ideas of like transgender people and like what they go through, and now I feel like I've had that idea explored way more thoroughly in the last 5 years. Not necessarily more thoroughly than this show, but just that like I've seen a lot of it, so it's not as like new and exciting as it was when this show came out. But I mean, it's still important and interesting stuff, and it still has some of my favorite characters. Steins Gate, to nobody's surprise, should probably still be on there. I've been, celebrating the show in other videos even before getting around to watching it again, so it would be a shocker if that one wasn't on there. And Kiki's Delivery Service. For a long time, it was my favorite Hayao Miyazaki film. The last time I watched it, I was kind of like half paying attention and falling asleep and was in like a weird situation, so like I'm not surprised that I didn't feel as strongly about it, but I think if I watch it again, I'd appreciate it again. So those are the ones that'll definitely be on there. Now I'm going to talk about the ones that are more questionable. These are shows that really mattered to me in the past because of like my taste back then, and like some of those elements I don't feel as strongly about, and these shows might not work for me anymore. This one I think will still probably be a favorite, but it's Honey and Clover, which is a show about a bunch of college students who are like coming of age and growing into adulthood and having all these interpersonal conflicts. Meant a lot to me when I was coming of age. I have come of age. I don't know if it'll be as important. Akira, fucking awesome movie, but ever since reading the manga, I can't love the movie as much because I just think the manga goes so much farther and is just more entertaining overall. But the movie's still great, so who knows. Cardcaptor Sakura, that was a show that I really loved. I loved the characters. I loved everything about it, but it's very long. And when I watch a very long show, then sometimes I feel like I don't know if I love the show like in the experience of watching it, or if it's like watching so much of it makes me innately attached to it. Like, I don't think there's any one episode of Cardcaptor Sakura that like sticks out in my mind, or like anything that happened that was like magical, the way that is the case for other shows on my favorites list. It's more just that in the course of watching 70 episodes of it, I grew so attached that I was just in love with it. So I don't know if I can form that same attachment again, if I could even sit through all 70 episodes again, because I do remember it being kind of difficult, but who knows, it could still be a favorite. Gankutsuou, I don't know how much of that show kind of lives and dies on like the intrigue of seeing it for the first time, though it's been a long time since I watched it, so I probably wouldn't even remember a lot of what happens. Petite Cossette, just because I mostly like it because it's a dark gothy thing, and I don't know how much I'd still be into that aesthetic. Earth Maiden Arjuna is another show from my teens that mattered to me a lot when I watched it because it kind of opened my eyes about a lot of things and like made me feel all these ways about like spiritual stuff and how we were treating the earth and shit, and I'm an adult now, I've seen all that stuff, I've heard about it. It wouldn't be a revelation to watch it again, so, but I do remember it being a solid show regardless, so maybe it'll still be on there. Haruhi. I have not watched Haruhi in so long, like all the way through, that I just don't know what I'll think of it now. Simoun is a show that I was into because I was super into Yuri in the late 2000s, like, all I cared about was Yuri, and so, like, that show was both a great show, a great, like coming-of-age adventure war story while also being super Yuri. So I don't, like, I mean, I still love Yuri, but not nearly in the obsessive way that I did as a teenager, so I have no idea. Higurashi, I remember really enjoying it, like, as it went, where I got really invested in the characters and stuff, but I also remember it being kind of stupid, so, who knows. Welcome to the NHK, another one that really reflected who I was at the time, when I was a paranoid, insane person who never left my room. Not that way anymore, don't know how it'll go. Manabi Straight, a huge part of what sold Manabi Straight for me was that I was going through high school at the time and trying to face like what was coming as I moved into adulthood, and it was really scary, and Manabi Straight kind of blew the doors open on my perspective about that. Obviously that was a long time ago. Bakano, I'm weirdly scared to rewatch Bakano because I loved it so much. It was one of my favorites for a long time because of the kind of show that it is. That it's this sleek, fun, badass show full of crazy characters. And I that's been my favorite genre since I was like a teenager. Or it was my favorite genre. I don't know how much it is now. I tried back when I was trying to be a novelist, like the stuff I wrote was heavily influenced by Bakano and Durarara and Black Lagoon. Like those were the shows that were like exactly what I was trying to copy. So like to me, I was very deeply involved with that genre. And I'm not like now I have just broader tastes, like there's more things I appreciate, and like nailing one genre I'm into isn't like a guaranteed in for something to be one of my favorites. And, like, I don't know how strong Bakano really is. Like, are the characters as great as I remember, or did I just like them because they're badasses, I'd have to watch it again to know for sure. The Sky Crawlers was my favorite Mamoru Oshii film, another one that connected with me a lot because of who I was at the time, that I saw it as this movie that was about, like, trying to find a meaning to your life and, like, figure out what makes your life worth living or finding something worth dying for. I have no idea how I'd feel about that now. Kure-nai I liked because it was fucking weird and it was different and nobody else seemed to like it and I threw myself at it. I remember the ending being really bizarre and not that great, and that might bother me more now. Kanan, similarly, is a show that I felt like I was the only one who was really into. It was a Girls with Guns show, which I've always been a fan of, like, Girls with Guns type shows, but most of them were B-Train shows, which are terrible. This one had great animation and fun characters and lots of Yuri hints, and I liked all of that, but I also remember it being fucking stupid. Like, I remember the plot going totally off the rails in the second half and just being a nightmare. I have no idea if I'll enjoy it anymore. Angel Beats made me cry a lot when I watched it the first time. I don't know if it'd have the same effect now. Sora no Oto, when it came out, was my favorite show of that year. K-On! Season 2 came out that year. I had ranked it above K-On! Season 2 at the time. I doubt that will happen again. Anyway, aside from all those, there's a bunch of shows that I don't know that I'll like it less. These are just shows that were never, like, super strong favorites, so it won't be surprising if they're, like, an 8.5 as opposed to a 9 or something. Gundam 0080, Rurouni Kenshin Suiokuhen, Infinite Revius, Gunsmith Cats and Riding Bean, the OVAs, just kind of grouping those together. Otaku no Video, Millennium Actress, the third Gundam movie, Mononoke, Kashern Sins, Saki, Seikon no Quasar, Kuchu Buranko, and Princess Mononoke, which I haven't actually seen since 2004. And now lastly, I want to talk about just a couple of shows that I actually think I might like a lot more now than I did when I first watched them. The first of those is Giant Robo, which is an OVA series that I remember really enjoying, but kind of like not getting completely, and like I think I just didn't know what it was gonna be when I went into it, and it was kind of like surprising to like watch it unfold and not having really understood where it was going at the beginning. I think it might be more enjoyable a second time around. I know lots of people who consider it one of their favorite shows and who love it more and more every time they watch it, so I look forward to rewatching that one. Revolutionary Girl Utena, which this might come as a surprise to some people because I feel like I've lavished a lot of praise on this show whenever I've mentioned it in passing. But like when I first watched it, I thought it was like really good, but I didn't like have any particularly strong feelings of it as like a favorite. I considered it like a 7 out of 10 because Utena is a weird show. A lot of it's very repetitive. A lot of it is not necessarily likable. It's more interesting. And when I first watched the show, I was more about shows that are likable, shows with characters I'm really endeared to, and things that are just aesthetically pleasing. Which, I mean, Utena is aesthetically pleasing, but it's also kind of all over the place. And it was not really in my genre. Like, I wasn't that into the kind of shoujo-y stuff that it was doing. So, interestingly enough, what got it more onto my favorites list was reading so much analysis of it over time. Like, while other people were watching the show, and all of them were, like, really getting into it and really dissecting its themes and looking at it, its symbolism, and, like, talking about it in depth, like, seeing what other people were saying endeared me to the show, and also watching the movie, because I watched the movie, like, a couple years later, and I really loved the movie, and it kind of, like, made the themes more clear to me and more relatable. And it's also just a fucking awesome movie. But I have never actually rewatched the entirety of Utena. I've only rewatched the first, like, 3 or 4 episodes since 2007. So, like, most of what I'm going on when I talk about how great it is, like, the secondhand knowledge of it, the memories of it, and the analysis of it, rather than actually rewatching the show. So there's a chance I'll rewatch it and realize that I don't even like it as much as I expect to. But there's also a good chance that I'll like it a lot more than I did the first time. So it's an interesting question for me. And lastly, Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt. I was not a very big fan of that show when it came out. I considered it like a 6 out of 10. I really didn't like the crassness of the humor. Like, it just was not really my style to have, like, just outright potty humor, where it's actually a lot more of my style now. I like that stuff a lot more. I like the sort of themes of Panty and Stocking, and more importantly, the show is just so fucking beautiful. And back then, I'm fairly certain I watched it on like a shitty stream, so like a lot of the impact of the visuals was lost on me, but since then, I've like rewatched episode 1 in high quality, and it was like mind-blowing how fun it is to watch. And I'm also a huge fan of Hiroyuki Imaishi at this point, so I definitely want to see that one again, and I think I'll probably like it a lot more the second time around. So yeah, anyways, that's the current state of trying to get my favorites list perfected. I don't even know if that totaled up to 72 shows in total, and there's other shows that on rewatching I could see myself liking more or less. I don't know. That's why there's no scores on all those shows. My completed list is also somewhat inflated with, like, countless shorts that I usually don't mark. I don't mark any shorts on my list of all the shows, but I will give them scores on my anime list. So missing from this would be Daikon 4, which is a short that I absolutely adore. Definitely belongs in my favorites list, so, you know, tack some stuff like that on. But anyways, that's the current state of it. And if you're someone who's always been trying to watch all the shows that I like, watch all my favorites or something like that, watch all the ones I just named, and that will guide you in the right direction.